presentation. Consistent with this prediction, the participants in our study who were looking for serious relationships wrote more about themselves in the About Me section of their profile and reported more of a tendency to alter the profile than those looking for casual relationships. That's interesting. So there was more change, more alteration from the real, I guess, if we were really looking for a serious relationship. And also, serious-minded daters posted photographs that independent judges deemed actually as more realistic because they're hoping to meet folks, so you don't. Given the subjectivity of photographs and the difficulty of selecting photographs that present a realistic view of the self, one possible conclusion that is daters motivated to find serious relationships put more thought into this presentation of physical appearance. So, issues of motivation. Also, the second little thing here, in addition to how motivated are we to really be careful about how we display our self, is the idea of how public it is, how the publicness of it. And this is what they found, which is pretty interesting. Consistent with this hypothesis, that is, if you know people are going to see this stuff, you spend more time with it. We found that online daters whose friends and acquaintances were aware of their online dating profiles posted photographs that were more accurate. Additionally, participants who posted profile photographs and hence made themselves visibly identifiable to anyone who accessed their profile were generally more accurate about their profile statements. In other words, online daters were mindful of their audience and engage in self-presentational acts meant to maintain their credibility in front of the people who knew them well. So if one of your friends is on one of these sites and see you, or they know that you're on the site, you still want to, people are going to find you, so you got to be cognizant of that, they say. Okay. And then the idea that this is going to be on your permanent record, as I have it in the on the slide. Online daters, they thought, this is the hypothesis, online daters should be motivated to control their profile self-presentation because it is a permanent record of their claims about themselves, which is different from face-to-face, because you see somebody one day, they might look like crap, like I do right now, but then next day, I always look like crap. But online daters in their sample reported that they often save their dates' profiles with a view to comparing them with information that transpires later in the relationship. So people, they look at the stuff and then I guess try to figure out is that actually accurate if they, I guess, meet face to face. So basically, impression motivation tied to online dating. To summarize, if folks are really in it for a serious relationship or a long-term relationship, folks tend to be much more motivated to present a certain type of self that is usually pretty accurate, but also because they're so serious about this and really want to find somebody, maybe more have a tendency to alter a few things. And also that those folks who are sort of out about this, I'm on Match.com or whatever, and other people know about it, it's not a secret, it's not private, they tend to be a little bit more accurate because their credibility with the people not on that site or on that site, both and, is an aspect there. And then finally, folks are cognizant that what they put on there is permanent, and so they compare and contrast. All right, impression motivation. And by the way, if you would think, just generally speaking, if you, and I know some of these are free, I think you have to pay for some of them, but if you're on there, you're already motivated to find someone. It depends on what type of relationship you're looking for, but I would suspect that there's always already a high motivation to offer a certain perception of self, certain presentation of self. Then, if you remember the second part of this big old theory, first is how motivated am I to be thoughtful or mindful about my self-presentation, strategic. And then the second part of that is, given that, how do I implement that impression to others? And so they say that one of the things they say is, folks want folks to be accurate. So, for the most part, it says folks do pick realistic self-presentations, more accurate self-presentations. My assumption would be a lot of people sort of aren't terribly accurate, but they say most folks, are. And that if you're not accurate, depending on the situation, that is unacceptable. For instance, they say that consistent with these, the participants in our study report that encountering deception in others' profiles was generally unacceptable, with deception about important relationship parameters, such as relationship status or having children, considered completely unacceptable. That is, if you say you're single but you're not, or say you don't have any kids but you have 20, I mean, that's... So deception is sort of is a no-no, apparently, although there is some vagueness here and there. And remember when we talked about the actual self versus the ought self versus the ideal self? This is what it says. Online daters report that it is important to present their actual self in their profiles because presenting oneself honestly is necessary for relationship development. Also, they reported that they needed to articulate visions of them grounded in reality, such that future meetings would not be unpleasant or surprising. Yeah, you were a woman on your profile. What happened? So basically, on a scale from 1 to 5, from completely inaccurate to completely accurate, all profile elements were rated higher than 4. So they think they're doing accurate things, and being accurate is important. Moreover, this is pretty interesting. Even as accuracy is important, people display parts of themselves that they are proud of, right? And so, if online daters were judged as physically attractive by the group of these Cornell students, they posted more pictures because they wanted to showcase that attractiveness. So you always sort of put the best foot forward, right? And there's lots of stuff in here about that that's really interesting. Also, even though, again, we're all about accuracy here, but put the best foot forward, but also we have this ideal self, and sometimes little slivers of the ideal self come into these profiles. One way to introduce elements of the ideal self without undermining one's credibility is to select aspects of the self that are either attainable in the near future or justifiable in some other way. For instance, online daters interviewed reported themselves as thinner online because being thinner was part of their ideal self-conceptualization, and they thought they could lose weight before meeting other daters in person, thus eliminating deception. In fact, presenting a thinner persona in the online profile served as a motivation to lose weight. Similarly, when presenting their activities, like hiking and skiing and bathing, some online daters reported selecting activities in which they engaged sporadically, but which they would like to pursue if they had more time. So there is some sense of ambiguity here. That's pretty interesting. And then it talks about the, remember, part of how you do all this and implement yourself is also considering the values of the audience. Apparently, there are two big things. I know I talked about Steve Duck, but two big things that that we are looking for in potential romantic partners. They say physical attractiveness and social status. They even talk about evolutionary psychology because these are characteristics of reproductive fitness. Youth and physical attractiveness serve as an honest indicator of people's health, good genes, and overall mate quality. And that's another conversation. Yes, you seem to have high mate quality. Oh, so romantic. La 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 la. Okay, and then they get into a lot of stuff about gender, which I think is really, really interesting. It's not surprising, and it's problematic, but it's interesting. So, research shows that men tend to prefer physical attractiveness and youth in potential mates as an indicator of fertility, whereas women tend to prefer social status and potential mates as an indicator of ability to provide and protect. So they conclude that online daters' desired impression should include youth and physical attractiveness, particularly for women, and high social status, particularly for men. I wonder if this works out the way. Yeah, interesting. So, also one of the things you remember, the context of the actual platform or whatever also impacts what we can and cannot do. And so, remember, we talked about editability, asynchronicity, and reallocation of cognitive resources. So basically, this is really, really interesting stuff here. Remember, we're dealing with physical attractiveness, but also social things. But they say that in this world of dating, physical attractiveness is highly prized, particularly for women. As a result, this is the interesting stuff. And by the way, they remember when you can sort of present your self-attractiveness through verbal descriptions as well as pictures. The full 81% of the daters in our sample misrepresented their height, weight, or age, even as accuracy apparently is very important. Although frequent, these misrepresentations were small in magnitude. On average, height deviations were about 0.77 inches, with actual height ranging from 3 inches taller, that's 3 inches, that's a very small person, to 1.75 inches shorter than their profile statements. Weight deviations were about 9 pounds, ranging from 35 pounds heavier to 20 pounds lighter. And the age deviations were about half a year, ranging from 3 to 9. So basically they say people are trying to offer a more flattering image of themselves, but small enough where folks don't say, "Oh, you a big liar, pants on fire." Because of some of these things you claim ignorance. Oh, I didn't know. Lies about height and weight were also tailored to the preferences of the opposite gender. Men lied more about their height, given that women prefer taller men as an indicator of high status. And women lied more about their weight, given that men prefer thinner women. All this stuff is contextual. Together, this data suggests that online daters lied strategically in the verbal description of their physical appearance. They deviated from the truth just enough to present a slightly more favorable version of the self without appearing dishonest. They catered to the preferences of their audience, or the perceived preferences of our audience, and they compensated for specific shortcomings such as lack of attractiveness. That's through the verbal stuff. They also, all the pictures. This is what they said. This is really interesting. Specifically, so folks alter their pictures, right? So women's profile photographs were rated as more attractive than their everyday photographs that were taken in the lab. Remember, they did headshots of folks and they compared what's on their dating profile to the stuff they did at the research thing. While that was not the case for men. So men generally look the same. Women's photographs were perceived as less accurate than men's. These describe